Invocation tonight from Daryl Schubert, St. Mary's Episcopal Church and New Home Lutheran Church.
Let us pray. We give you thanks, most generous God, for the beauty of the earth, for the produce of gardens, and the bountiful harvest. We praise and thank you, O God, for all your good gifts and blessings. Bless now, we pray, O God, this City Council meeting. Guide the discussion and the decisions that will be made. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Roll call.
Olson. Here. Rice.
Here.
Dosher. McCardle. Here. Barrington. Here. Allen.
Here.
Charks. Here. Smith.
Here. Okay. Next item on the agenda is approval of consent agenda items. Items appearing on the consent agenda may be removed by a city council member for discussion at the beginning of the formal agenda items. So is there any council members that want to remove anything from the consent agenda for discussion or any questions on the consent agenda? Stephanie, you want to?
Yep.
Make-
I just wanted to note that
I've
the
got a
sales
couple.
tax.
The
Can you
tax,
hear me now?
tax items?
Yep, that the
Okay.
sales tax collections were listed in your packet. There's a, you can see, since Michelle's gone, I thought I'd bring that up. It's up 0.29% from this point last year, which is still above collections from last year. And then the entertainment tax is up 1.24%. I did provide you with a overview when we were looking at what the collections have been the last couple of years, using the various projections. If you look at the lowest collections for November and December for the last 5 years and look at what's remaining in our budget, so that's kind of probably a worst case scenario. That would show I can't see, I'm sorry.
Minus 210.
Thank you, 210, 289 that we'd be short in revenue. I do still have $250,000 set aside in contingency for that potential revenue loss. So I just wanted to assure the council that we still have that earmarked in contingency in the event that we have less than anticipated from budget.
Okay.
Stephanie, when I was looking through this, can you explain something to me?
Mm-hmm.
So on line 19, where it says 2017 budget and that amount, then you've got 15-year average, 10-year average, 5-year average.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk to me about that? You're just telling us what was collected out as a 15-year average in that
So-
first quarter?
So if you look at the first quarter in 2017, 26% of the total revenue collected was collected in the first quarter. And so I used just a couple different ways to forecast it. So if you looked at, and you won't see this number on here because it's on a different spreadsheet that has the monthly breakdown, but in the last 5 years, we've collected the averages in the last 5 years, 79.5% of the total revenue by this point of the year. So if you take that and compare that to where we are year to date, that would project that we're going to collect 11,210. But, you know, you don't know what's going to happen in November and December. That's holiday shopping. It could go either way.
The thing that surprised me about this is looking at last year, at 2007, oh, this is 2017, okay.
Yep.
Could you
Yep.
cue your mic, please?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's so unlike me to not have my mic on, sorry.
So I did just add this other, you know, looking at the last 2 months of the year to try to find the lowest collections, just because I wanted to have a conservative number to keep in that contingency just in the case we don't meet budget. So
Okay. So you're saying that 9% is this year. So far, we've collected 9%. Got it. It was late.
Okay. Any other questions on consent agenda items? I've got one on the nuisance property update report we talked about. It talks about Havens and Burr. Is there any other specifics on that can be shared? I'm just curious.
Not really.
They're making progress?
Yeah, they're doing some work. You know, it's still kind of slow going, but they're making progress.
Okay. The other item that caught my eye in the finance report that I wanted to point out, and Nate, maybe it's a question for you, but the campground shows a $8,000 some $100 loss at this point, and I'm wondering if there's any anticipated revenues for the campground. Otherwise, we ran the campground and lost money.
We actually had some adjustments that we had to make on repairs and maintenance items that aren't reflected in this month. They'll show
Okay,
in the next
show
month.
next month?
Yep.
Okay. That's what I got from Michelle, so I wanted to bring that up to make sure that was known. Okay. Any other questions on consent agenda items? Okay. Entertain a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Roll call?
Smith,
Aye.
Charts,
Aye.
Allen,
Aye.
Barrington, Ricardo, Dosher, Rice,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Citizens input. If you need to address the mayor and members of the council on items that were not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium and state your name and concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action will be taken at this time. So is there anyone that wishes to address the council on items not included in the agenda tonight? Stephanie?
I just wanted to bring up one thing to the council. I did have a couple questions on where we are on 3rd and Main. The response that I sent out was just that there's nothing new to report from the last project update. The current owner is continuing to make progress, so they're doing what they need to with the city. But the question that I have that goes along with that, originally you guys wanted me to schedule that once a month, the project updates. But if you would like it more frequently, we can do that. That's up to your discretion. I just thought I'd throw it out there to see what the response was.
And just
Well-
for me personally, unless there's a change, but at this point, I still get a lot of questions about that.
3rd and
so-
Main? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why, if anything changes, I mean, if it's just status quo, then maybe just say no change. I don't know, just so that we know.
And I think it's good for people to understand that status quo now means that they're making progress continually. Status quo doesn't mean that nothing's happening.
Okay.
So you check on them every 2 weeks, or does you know their
Yeah, we-
log sheet or what they're doing?
They don't have a formal schedule, and I think John,
Okay.
I did view the property this afternoon about 4:30. There is progress being made. They got the bottom walls kind of sealed and capped up, ready for, attach the first floor. They do have 2 walls built and laying on the ground outside, waiting to be erected when they get the base right. That's kind of where it is. Like, me and Justin usually visit weekly. So given the situation, he's several times he tried to get contractors, nobody wants it. He's doing it himself with 1 or 2 guys. They are making small bits of progress every time I go by every week.
Do they have to have the various stages inspected? Or do we just
They
assume
have a
it's being
stamp.
done properly? Or-
They have a stamped plan, and it has to go according to that plan. So I'm going to look at the plan once a week or once every 2 weeks and making sure they're making connections as prescribed by the design professional. That's about as much inspections I'm going to do. I mean, that's all we can do, is they have to do it the way the gentleman designed it to be erected, the way he designed it to be attached, with the fasteners he recommended, and so forth.
And I think that the concern that I have expressed more often than anything else is when will the road be open? So if it follows the plan, do we have any estimation on when we'll be able to open 3rd?
Anything I would tell you to be a guess.
there's really not a timeline on when that happens, but we do have a point we know of that once the roof is supported, the street can be opened back up. We just don't know how long it's going to take to get to that point.
And they did, their lift broke down, the one they were renting, and they had to go to Sioux Falls to get a different one not a week ago, too, or a week and a half ago. I stumped them for a couple, 3 days.
Okay, thank you, John.
We got a couple updates on the Veterans Park.
Okay.
The 3 metal benches that are going to be along Main Street should be done within the next 3 weeks. They're getting made by Bailey Metal Fabrication here. They were all sponsored by local people. And then we also had a family step forward. They're going to be putting a fairly extravagant Christmas wreath in the park, a full donation. They want to remain anonymous at this time, but it should look very nice when it gets here. So,
Okay, thank you, Lyndon. Anyone else? Okay, I've been approached on a couple items. One, when can we get rid of the orange barricades at the east end of 6th Avenue Plaza? Anybody? I talked to Scott. He said some bollards were ordered. I don't know.
The bollards are here, and actually, when we asked SPN about whether or not
Yeah.
those are needed, they're not needed to be there. The concern is that people will still
Drive
drive
up
up
on
onto
there.
the sidewalk. That's why they left them here. The bollards got here last week, but Rex Winkle will be doing the installation. They'll be,
Are they,
I think there's 3.
they're not orange, are they?
No, they're black. They're decorative, and they're actually able to be removed, and then it'll be flush, so if you have to bring stuff up there. And then there's also 2 over in the alley.
Okay. I mean, I got the comment that it just looked, they want to know what construction stuff's still going on and it doesn't look done. So. Okay, the other, yeah. While Jeff is embarrassed over there, the other item I was approached on is exiting the Corn Palace on the south side from the basketball games. When people went out last week, there were no lights on at all in the 6th Avenue Plaza area. None of those street lights that we have in there were working, and nothing on the side of the Corn Palace, and it was really pretty dark. So I don't know, are those lights that are along the south end of, are they not hooked up yet, or?
No, they are. There's just an error that happened for some reason. The
Oh,
photo
okay.
sensor wasn't working. Muth was back here on Friday, and they switched it over to a timer, and for some reason, the timer
So they
shut
were,
off.
I haven't been out there at dark.
They're on now.
They're not?
They
Okay,
stay on until
okay.
2 a.m.
Okay,
along with the
great.
sculpture, but they don't know why that photo sensor wasn't working, so they put it back on timers.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I knew Scott said he was on vacation, so I hadn't heard from him, so. Yeah, I'm still connected. Okay. Any other citizens' input? Okay, we'll move on. I'll entertain a motion for the city council to recess and sit as the Board of Adjustment.
So moved.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, next item is item 9, hearing on John and Tracy Fink. John and Tracy Fink have applied for a conditional use permit to operate a lodging house in the residential property located at 1400 North Capitol Street, legally described as Lot 7 and west 40 feet of Lot 8, Block 4, Northridge Addition, City of Mitchell, Davison County, South Dakota. The property is zoned R2 Single Family Residential District.
Council members, if you would direct your attention to the November 13th Planning Commission minutes, you would see that the Planning Commission did hold a hearing on this request. There was a motion made to recommend approval with the stipulation that to be reviewed in 6 months. And if you read the minutes, you would see that that also failed. So in essence, there's no or they're not recommending it. So I see the applicants are here, and there may be other parties who wish to talk about it. So anyway, I'll give the floor to the applicants, and they can explain it. So.
Yeah, just step up to the podium and introduce yourself.
These things scare me.
Yeah, here we go.
John Fink, my wife Tracy, second row here. We reside at 712 East 14th Avenue, the property adjacent to 1400 North Capitol. Can I pass around some photos? A friend of ours accused us of being troublemakers. Well, we are not here to cause trouble. We're here to introduce an idea, a concept that's not new. In fact, it's a niche market that we're thinking that we can provide some help to the city of Mitchell with the niche market is Airbnb and VRBO and all those things that come across with travelers that when they travel, instead of a hotel accommodations, they would like to stay in a home away from home. And we purchased the property next to us in January of 17. It's a unique home. I think everybody's aware of the style of it. It was designed by an architect in New York, built by Mitchell Tech, I guess it was called at that time. Sits on the corner, and we live just to the property to the right of that map. So we're trying to accommodate families for they're in town for funerals or weddings or family reunions or just traveling through and maybe have larger families and want to stay together. So that's our concept. Be happy to answer any questions I'm sure you have.
I'm on the Planning and Zoning Committee. Didn't have much to say there, but you said that you rented this or you let family and friends stay there.
We have had events there, basically family and friends or acquaintances of ours who have hosted painting parties or baby showers, bridal showers. I'm not sure of any, quilt retreat. Tracy is I don't know if to use the right word here, an avid quilter and has friends in town who love getting together and doing that. And we have in this home a large room. We call it a multi-purpose room that can accommodate a lot of people, and a lot of people with tables and sewing machines and ironing boards, and they have fun, and it's their social get-together. So we have had relatives stay there. Yes. I might add that we do live adjacent to this, and we're not looking for a frat house or party every weekend type atmosphere. We can control who's there, and of course, we have to live amongst that too. So we feel we're able to monitor that as opposed to somebody living other side of town or maybe even out of town. We can monitor what goes on there and make sure that it's kept up, looking nice, because our yard looks nice. And the pictures I passed around show you what we've kind of done on the inside of the home. We have done very little to the outside of the home yet. That's on the list for next spring. So we've made the home usable for the functions that we want it to be.
So John, I know one of the concerns that have been expressed by your neighbors is parking. Do you want to just address parking for us, please?
Yes, parking.
And you know what, we have a pointer if you want to use a pointer. Don't we have a pointer that we use sometimes?
Then you'll see how nervous I am.
Do you need a drink of water? Because we have a...
Yeah, that'll be fine. We live yes, that's our property. Between our property and the corner property of 1400 North Capitol, I stepped it off. We can park, and the two driveways, we can park 14 vehicles. More than enough for the events that we have there, unless there's a large bridal shower or baby shower or a graduation next spring. There'll be some parking and some cars going past there for a couple hours in an afternoon. We don't anticipate this to be all night long, those kinds of things. But we can accommodate 14 vehicles just on our curb, I guess you might say.
And one of the other concerns that you and I had a conversation about previously was the concern about the visibility when people come to the corner to turn. And didn't you talk to Lyndon about that?
I did. There was a weekend where there was, yeah, I'm lost there now. What? Oh, we shifted. Okay. Yep. The P is the property of 1400 North Capitol, and we're just above that on the map. Doesn't show the flowers blooming in the yard. Anyway, I did visit with Mr. Overweg, Chief Overweg, I'm sorry. There was one event where cars were parked up to the stop sign and immediately to the right of the stop sign going on Capitol. And the visibility was difficult. I talked to Chief, and he said there is a city ordinance, that you have to stay back 25 feet. I guess I wasn't aware of that. I'm from the country, so I don't know all the city rules. But we talked about possibility of yellow lines on that corner.
I did tell them that we could paint the curb line 25 feet back from each of the corners, similar to what's done on 15th and Capitol and 12th and Capitol.
And that still accommodates 14 vehicles that we can park.
How many events have you had so far?
We've had, I'll ask the planning director,
Specific, there's just been a lot of, we've just tried to have it be available for people that would like to try to do things. So if you want a ballpark number, I would say 15 events that.
Has there been complaints about parking during these
The
events?
one baby shower, yes.
there was not a complaint voiced to us,
Right.
but we know that there was a concern. And I understand that concern. That's very valid.
So did you charge for those, or did you?
We accept donations. We have a friend who built a website for us, and there are suggested fees on there. That's what we anticipate we're going to charge in the future for our events. We understand we're not fully licensed. We're floating this out there to see how this works. And people are pretty excited about it. We've had various painting parties, I guess was another thing, where ladies get together and make these signs for your home with all kinds of cute sayings on them. They're very popular. And we're allowing this, we're hosting these things to get people in the door to see what we have.
Okay, John. I've got, and I understand the concept in that, and so I asked Justin some questions and Stephanie some questions and got some information from the state of South Dakota. And the state of South Dakota, just as of September 1st of this year, approved Airbnb to begin collecting sales tax in South Dakota starting September 1st. And they started hearings on this back in 2015, but the state of South Dakota, prior to September 1st, Airbnb was not a licensed taxable entity until that time. They state that the Department of Revenue is currently looking to engage in conversations to reach similar agreements with other platforms, including VRBO, which is Vacation Rental by Owner, Craigslist, Flipkey, and others. Department of Revenue estimates that 600 Airbnb hosts exist in the state of South Dakota today, including 26,000 visits in South Dakota last year. So whether we say something about this particular property or whatever, we're going to have people asking us this question. Either that or they're just going to exist and operate under the radar, and we won't know about them either until the State Department of Revenue is after them, or, as Justin alluded to me, the city finds out based on there's some city taxes that are also due outside of the sales taxes for hotels and that type of stuff. The other question I asked, based on our bid discussions and things that we have going, if we do bring in Airbnb and other type of people, and they are licensed through the state, and can we impose the $1 per night on them? And Stephanie, I think you answered potentially we'd have to check on that. Maybe Justin has other idea, because the question was also asked of me, and if you do some research, Southern California, especially around the San Diego area, had some municipalities come out totally against Airbnb because of the hotel industries, that they didn't want people going to destination visit areas and not staying in the hotels. But I haven't heard anything from any of our hotel owners. So, Justin, do you know if we could do the $1 if this goes forward?
I think there's good potential for that, but I'd have to do a little bit more
yeah.
research into it.
Okay.
But we had to specifically identify a boundary. when
A
we put
boundary,
those-
yeah.
Right.
So that
those
was the
bids
good
together.
question.
Right.
If they were within the boundary, then it would be okay. If outside the boundary?
Well, that's going to be one of the things we've got to, if they're outside the boundary as it sits right now, which I believe they would be, then it's not something you can do, but you can always come back and amend those boundaries to a certain extent. So that's what you'd have to look at, is to see if there's some way to make that work.
Do you charge by the room or by the whole facility?
We
Or
are
both.
proposing to charge basically by the facility or how many people want to stay overnight. Right? It's not my expertise. That's what we intend to do. We'll probably make adjustments on the way. The dollar per thing, is that per person staying there or per room or how, what is that? I guess that's kind of new to us. Or I guess we'll find out
I
when
guess
it's
the
imposed.
It's per room,
Per room.
per hotel night.
Well, right, the context that we run into it is in motels where they're
Yep.
renting out individual rooms. So I think we'd have to look at how we can make that work, because if it's just by the facility, I don't know if you charge by the bedroom or if you count just one facility, so.
But that charge is to the customer, correct?
Right.
But it's passed
Well,
through.
however,
We'd have to
Collect-
the
collected by
proprietor wants to do it.
We have applied for a sales tax license and do have that. When we're ready to go full launch, we want to have all our i's dotted and t's crossed. And that's, I guess, why we're here.
Any other questions? I've got one other item that I'd like to address based on some of the emails that we got, and for people out there, I think we all got emails on this. The question was asked, would you like it in your neighborhood if this happened as a counselor or a council person? And I have to tell you that I live across from a city-run facility that I live across from Patton Young Park, and this year so far, there have been 50 rentals of that, and cars are parked there all the time, sometimes overnight. The city has allowed people to sleep there at least on 2 occasions that I'm aware of. So the fact that this same type of entity, the city runs one right now, and I'm not even, 50 rentals is what Nathan was able to give me, and that doesn't count the baseball games that go on over there, where there are sometimes hundreds of cars parked in our neighborhood at a city facility. And I can tell, and I don't remember who sent the email, but I can tell them that no, it has not ruined the neighborhood, and the neighborhood is still real vibrant and good and uses the park. The fact that the city rents it for different purposes. Yeah, sometimes people park in my driveway and people have driven up on my lawn, and there are cans in the street sometimes after events. But it's getting used, and it makes actually, to me, makes the neighborhood more vibrant than it does. So I wanted to address that. I live across, I have for 30 plus years, and it hasn't been available for rent all of that time, because I think when it was originally built, it didn't have stove and refrigerator and other things in it. That all got added, but it gets used. And the fact that maybe there's a niche market, to me, it kind of tells me maybe there is.
And I agree with you, Steve. I pondered that very question myself, and I honestly would not have a problem if this were in my neighborhood. It's a beautiful property. I've been to the Finks home, and I know what they do with their yard, and I would think it would be absolutely, it's going to be beautiful inside. It already is beautiful from the pictures on the inside, and it will be beautiful on the outside. In my opinion, it will do nothing but improve property values just based on the improvements that have been made. And the second part of it that seemed to come up quite often was the parking, which we addressed. But I think that it's a common misconception, and Lyndon and I have had this conversation, that I think people believe that the frontage of their property belongs to them, that the parking space that exists in front of their home is their parking space. And unfortunately, that's not a true thing. That is public parking. And so, when our neighbors have a gathering at their house, and it happens all the time, and we're a very social neighborhood, and people have gatherings and their cars parked along the street, and like you, Steve, I feel like that is, I don't know, it makes me kind of happy knowing that people are together and gathering and enjoying life. So my answers to those questions were, yeah, it would not bother me, and I strongly support this happening. I think this is something we're filling a need in our community, and it will, I anticipate, be a growing need. I think that Airbnb is something that is on the rise, and I think that we need to, keep up with the times. It's happening in South Dakota and other communities, and I think that it's something that we need to welcome here in Mitchell.
Just to note, as far as the whole Airbnb aspect goes, you've got other communities in South Dakota like Sioux Falls and Rapid City where obviously there's been a larger market for that, and it's been going on a lot longer than it has in Mitchell. But those communities have specifically gone and made changes to their ordinances in order to accommodate that. And just based on our review of our zoning code, there's really no additional need for change. So.
Okay, that was a question. If we knew what they did, the other question that was asking me, is there any updates to how our codes are written today to address this? And
It doesn't look to me to be necessary under our version of, or our zoning code that we have implemented. Really, they fit the definition of a lodging house pretty well, and that's a conditional use. So really, anywhere that a lodging house is listed as a conditional or permitted use, somebody could come in and request it or put one in that spot. Now, you might at some point want to reevaluate where you allow those lodging houses, but I don't think any other real change would be necessary.
Do we have anything else like this in the city, or would this be the first?
To my knowledge,
That we know of, anyway.
To my knowledge, it'd be the first official one.
yeah.
We have a bed and breakfast, but not
Right. And bed and breakfast, just from the definitional standpoint under our zoning code, the difference between a lodging house and a bed and breakfast is whether it's owner occupied at the same time. So this being a lodging house, the owners don't actually live in it while they're renting it out. Whereas a bed and breakfast, the owners live in it while they're renting it out.
So if somebody's running an Airbnb and living in the house, it wouldn't be defined as a lodging house?
That I think would be considered bed and breakfast, but I think really they're.
Kevin, your question, is this the only one? I've been approached by several people since this came out and say, well, yeah, they know so-and-so's been leasing out or been Airbnb in rooms in their house for a couple years, and didn't know that it wasn't tax legal in South Dakota yet and all the other things that went with it, but the Department of Revenue might catch up with them depending on what actually gets reported now that Airbnb is licensed in the state as of September 1st.
So Justin, with the current code, is it a conditional use or is it a permitted use?
In this location, it's a conditional use, and I don't know that it would be a permitted use in any other area. I think if it's allowed, or if it's possible, that it would be a conditional use. Neil might have a better answer than that.
I do believe it in the R4 district, it's a permitted use, but, and I believe in the other residential districts, it'd be a conditional use and I'd have to double check, but I don't think it's allowed at the lake in the RL district. But I could be corrected. I don't have the code in front of me.
Some of the phone calls that I've got, the fact that it's in my backyard to some extent, and definitely in our ward, but if it's in my backyard down the road, if it's gets that many cars parked down there, I might come on down myself. That must be one big party. But the biggest things, the few things that, like I said, I didn't get many calls on it, just got a few. Some were not opposed to it, and there were some that are opposed to it. The biggest thing that I got was the parking again. We talked about it, obviously, the long-term parking, if it's something was maybe rented for a weekend compared to short-term parking. Majority of the short-term parking, really, nobody was really concerned. It's going to be no different than this holiday season coming up. We all know cars be parked all over neighbors' houses and be cars in front of my house that are across the road from the neighbors and what it may be. So short-term or a bridal shower that might last for 2 to 3 hours isn't really a big concern too. It was more the long-term parking that they were somewhat concerned with. Obviously not knowing how many spots of parking you had at that time with, let alone curbside, but also your driveways from your own to the one at the current spot. It'd have to be quite a few different people, which I don't even know if the place is big enough to host that many to actually have, let's say 14 cars, which you mentioned before. That would be almost everybody that was at the house driving their own car, which probably is not going to be a true statement. I think the parking is adequate. The one thing I mentioned, a few people that did call me up as I asked them, I said, and we've done this before, from conditional uses to permitted uses, that we've gave what the planning commission voted down with a 6-month trial run. Because I think most people are usually in an uproar against things right away until they actually give it a chance and try it out. And then it seems to come to find out 90% of the time, if not more, when we've done these conditional uses, come to find out, wow, it really isn't a problem, I guess. You know, I sort of got all excited over nothing because now we've done it and it really didn't bother me at all. I really didn't even know it even existed. I think in the last 11 years that I've sat here, I think there's only been one that we maybe had up for a 6-month run and we actually denied it in 6 months because they weren't doing their job what they're right as, and I don't think they were keeping their something clean or the cars weren't off it. I can't remember what it was, but I believe out of all the conditional uses that we've gave the runaround came back to 6 months later, a year later, we've reapproved them is what I'm trying to get at. Because it just comes to find out that people in the neighborhood really don't, you know, find out that it really wasn't a big issue and it just sort of keeps on going. So I've sort of mentioned that to the people that have called me and voiced their opinion and I've got more of that yes feeling that that's fine as long as we want to give it a 6-month run, knowing that if there is going to be an issue in 6 months, unlike we've talked before, Neil, that I would want to resend a letter out to all the, I believe 21 people got this time, send it out to those 21 again, give them a chance to come back and have them actually realize this is the issues we had. If they did have any issues, hopefully there's nobody that comes back and they realize this is a good thing like we're all sort of assuming, but at least that opportunity to come back, and if we do have a lot of issues that it might have to get shut down in 6 months, but it sounded like, you know, I'm not saying for sure yes, but they sound like they were open to that option, not just giving a green light, good to go forever, but the fact that if there is problems in maybe 6 months, can we revisit it, and it might have to come to an end. But
I think that's a good suggestion, Marty, and one that I think we've got to consider. And I don't know if John's got more to add out here for now, but I think there's people in the audience that may want to come up and maybe visit. I see there are people here, maybe they're just here to listen, but just want to make for sure we give them an opportunity, Steve.
Yep, that's fine. Anybody else in the audience wish to address or make comment on this permit? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Emily Bickett, and I'm their backdoor neighbor. Anyway, as I read the paper and the concerns, I thought really they aren't that big of concerns, because parking is, I don't think, a problem. If they need to, they can come around the corner and park in my garage. But, and I know that they're not slumlords, believe me. The area will be kept prim and proper. It's already been improved, 100%. So, and the other thing is, I really think that we need this type of thing in town. Families that have, you know, need to rent 2 rooms in a motel and eat out, that's an expense. So they are maybe not going to come to that wedding or that baby shower or whatever. But I think if they have a place like this, they would be more than welcome there, and they would be interested in staying. So I totally support the whole idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, George?
Yes, I'm George Breidenbach, what is my address? 730.
You've lived there so long, you don't need to know.
737 East 14th, just down the block at the end of the cul-de-sac from their house. When John came to the house, bought his house there just east there, it was a rundown house, hadn't had anybody living in it for a while, and he improved it immensely. And then when they got married, then John really went to work on it. And I see no problem with it. I know there's a B&B in the neighborhood that causes no problem. There's been no complaints. Yes, that corner, I could see that it could be congested, but with the 25-foot rule, there's no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, entertain a motion someplace?
I move that we approve, I'm trying to see what we're asking for. Move approval of the conditional use permit with the 6-month reevaluation.
Was there any other conditions, Neil, that the planning commission was looking at other than the 6 months?
Other than.
Parking.
Letters. Sending out letters
So,
in
okay.
advance, because we don't, that isn't our normal protocol, but if you want to put that as a condition, that would be fine.
And that we send out letters to those 21 neighbors as well to make sure things are going swimmingly.
I have a question for John before we.
Sure.
I'll second Susan's vote, and then we'll have
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Marty. John?
John, how is it?
John and John?
Yeah. How is it that we've been operating for so many months without proper okay?
Good question. We have been putting a lot of work into this effort and with wondering, is this going to work or fly or not? So we've been testing the water. Friends and family type basis, testing the water. And the water is fine. We get lots of good comments. We've had people say, we want to live here. No, you can't. It's ours, but yeah, that's the reason. We've had some occasions where there's been several people there at once, and we're doing that with the idea of introducing it to the community. Get them in the door, look, see what's going on, and this is the purpose of it, for families, for be able to come together. And everybody goes, oh, we'll have to remember that. So yes, we have been using it on a limited basis. It's not completely remodeled. We still have work to do. So we're just trying to get everything in line so that we can go full blast, launch this thing, get on the chamber website. The Convention Bureau apparently is willing to help us with that, and other websites, and we're ready to go when you guys allow us to go. Does that answer?
Yeah, that answers the question. I have used VRBOs a number of times when vacationing, and they're a great option. You know, there's a difference, but I've never rented a house that is also open for meetings and quilting parties. And, you know, there are a lot of meeting places in town now that would serve those needs. You know, I get the impression you're doing two things. You want to run a VRBO and have other functions there that could be held at a business that's now open in town. Right?
Well,
I mean, what?
Correct. People choose, if they want to come to our location, fine. If they want to use something in town that's set up that way, that's fine too. We're just wanting those people to see what we have. We're not trying to outdo the person in town. We're just trying to publicize, I guess you might say, it would be the word for that. Our main purpose is overnights. That's where the revenue would be, and that's how we've designed this facility to be used. You bet.
I don't have anything for Mr. Fink, but I think somebody needs to uphold the other side of the question here. There are several issues before us. One is basic philosophy. We zone for particular reasons, and so one of the thresholds we're going to step over tonight is basically saying zoning doesn't matter. anymore because we're going to allow various businesses in residential areas. And once we open this door, it's open to everybody. And I don't know that that's something that we necessarily want to do tonight. And maybe I'm trying to hold back the tide, but you look at the motels in our town, and there's significant sales tax generated there. There's significant property tax generated there, depending on the facility, whether or not they have, you know, a restaurant license and bar license and so forth. There's significant entertainment tax generated there. We've asked them to participate in a bid, and now I realize this is a small thing, but we're beginning to slit their throats. And I am not sure we want to take that step. We've got a problem downtown with some empty buildings. Do we want to create a situation where now we have large behemoths that are empty because we're creating this competition on an individual house-by-house basis? Talked about friends and family. You can have whatever friends and family you want over to your own home. That's not going to stop. Whether you have it at your own home or you have it next door at your other home, that makes no difference. But the question for us today is, do we want to begin the slippery slope of eroding the sales tax, property tax, entertainment tax base we have with partners who have participated in a bid or not? I, for one, don't want to do that.
I just thought I would respond to some of those comments, Mel. You know, I think that we already allow businesses in residential areas. We have people that practice accounting out of their home. We have people that teach music lessons out of their home. We have people who do daycare or cut hair. We just approved someone to have a hair salon in their home for various reasons. So I don't think that this is really stepping beyond that, with the exception of the fact that, you know, we may have some overnight guests, which it seems like there's ample parking. And I also think that we want to be careful that we're not stopping free enterprise and not allowing people to have the opportunity to, you know, use their resources and have a little opportunity to provide a service. And if this were a company that or if they were saying we want to build downtown, and I'm not saying that they should or not, but let's say that they'd done it downtown, they would still be in competition with those businesses that you're referring to. It would just be in a different location. I have a hard time telling them that because they want to utilize a home that's in a residential area, that they can't do this. I have a problem with that. So
The only response I would have, those individual businesses you mentioned, those are come-and-go businesses. They're not a situation where there's a large number of cars there for an extended period of time, and they're certainly not there overnight. I think there's a fundamental difference between those kinds of businesses and a residential motel in a neighborhood.
Was anybody on the council contacted by any of the motel owners at all?
I was not.
As a concern? Anybody either, so that's something else.
I have, research I've done, I've heard of other municipalities where that has been a concern, and there's been that discussion, but I was not contacted.
Justin, when I was on the planning commission last Monday, you were talking about maybe Rapid City or Sioux Falls doing this?
Yeah, both Rapid City and Sioux Falls did make changes to their ordinances to better accommodate Airbnb-type businesses.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign? No. Okay. Motion passes, I believe.
We
Correct,
wanna
Neil?
do
Accept?
We want to do a roll call.
Do you want to do a roll call to have it
Since
documented?
we do need 6.
Okay. Roll call vote, please. I'll try not to pop my peas.
Wilshire? Yes. McCardle?
Yes.
Barrington?
Aye.
Allen?
Aye.
Sharks?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Olson?
No.
Rice?
Aye.
7-1.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Next item is hearing on Steve and Roberta McCullough, 103 North Minnesota, for a conditional use, and this application has been withdrawn. Neil, is there any continuance of this or anything we need to do?
He's going to redraw the whole plan altogether.
So it will be
Just make a note that it's withdrawn.
Be a brand-new application to the Planning Commission?
Right, at a
Okay.
future date.
Okay, thank you. Entertain a motion for the Board of Adjustment to reconvene as City Council.
So moved.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Action to approve application for renewal of liquor and wine licenses for 2018. Lyndon?
We've only got one that's had more than one violation over the past 12 months, and that's Dr. Lucky's Bar. On 5/6 of 17, some patrons were observed leaving the bar with open containers. On 6/8 of 17, a 20-year-old confidential informant was able to buy alcohol at the bar. They failed a sting. And then 10/6 of 17, a non-employee person was allowed to be in the bar after 2 a.m. when they close, which is violation of city ordinance. So all these incidents are different, and they have not reoccurred. The same incident has not reoccurred. And I would add that they recently did pass a sting here just this past month. So
As far as the violations go, I'll say that the first two were not prosecuted. Tried working with them, and they did make the improvements necessary and haven't had any reoffenses on those matters. The third one was prosecuted, and that case was resolved last week. So to their
You
credit.
say the first two, that was the open container outside and the after 2 a.m. occupation?
The open container and the underage sale.
Okay.
The staying after hours, that one was prosecuted and resolved last week. To their credit, these are all different issues. So as they're, as these issues have come up and we've spoken with them, they've gone a long ways to addressing them once they happen. So as Lyndon mentioned, there haven't been any reoffenses on those individual charges, but it's been 3 different topics. So
Were all 3 situations under the same ownership?
yes.
the underage sting, they were cited.
Oh, they were.
In state court, yeah.
Okay, that
Right.
one, that one was not a city charge. So.
No, it was under state court. The bartender was cited. And the
Thank you, Justin.
licensee and the manager, I believe, are here if you have questions.
Hi,
Good evening. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Dave Heisinger. This is my sister Patty Tapp. We're fairly new at this business, and we are making a couple mistakes, but at the same time, we're learning and adjusting as far as the going out in the street. There was no sign in the bar. There hadn't been a sign in the bar for 15 years. And we did put them up. As far as the after hours, there was a guest of mine, and I went down to, I live above the bar. We had went up to the room, but I came back down when they were doing janitorial work. And she was in there with me. So the sting, he was laid off before the cops left. So that's all I can say.
Okay.
Often when we have the sting failures, they implement some devices and what? Yeah, training and then other ways to help them identify people who are underage. Do you have those kinds of things?
I'd send them all to CAS training, and
Had they been to cast training before the sting?
Yes.
Yeah, that bartender was cast certified.
He's no longer working for you.
No, he was laid off before the cops left.
Wait, put away, get done with it.
You know, it's stuff that happens, and it's a new business for me.
I will make a motion to approve all the applications.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign? Okay, motion carried. Next item on the agenda is request to name Corn Palace floor Gary Munson Court, tabled from the October 16th meeting.
Well, I can kick off the discussion for you. I know Scott is out today. He's on vacation. So this request came to the council. I put the original request back in the packet. Since then, I think the council asked the mayor to bring that back to the Corn Palace Operations Advisory
Yes.
Committee, which was done. At that committee meeting, they had quite a bit of discussion about what the potential would be for sponsorship of that floor in the future. Apparently, at one point, naming or sponsorship of the floor was part of the Daktronics package, but at some point, they removed that opportunity because they were having a hard time selling it because it was covered some of the year with the gift shop in the summer and other times going on. Scott did ask whether they would, if Daktronics would be okay with the stickers being placed on the floor. And they said yes, but at that, when the question was asked, it was at no fee received to the city. So that's if the city's not getting any financial contribution for that. If the city was receiving money for that, it would have to be another ask or another conversation. Trying to restate some of the other items that came up at the advisory committee, some of the other recommendations that were given in lieu of maybe putting the stickers on the floor is, could they consider a different gym that could be named after the high school coach? Could they add a banner that would come down when they bring down the other Mitchell Colonels banners? Or could the sticker just be applied during the Mike Miller Classic and not a permanent naming of the court? There was a lot of discussion about whether or not there's a value towards the floor and keeping that open for future sponsorship and what that value would be if so. Did I cover everything from that committee meeting, Jeff? I hope so. That's been a couple weeks ago now. And yeah, John, no, Kevin was there too. That's right. That basically was most of the comments regarding the naming of the court. The other item that came up for discussion in that meeting is whether or not the city should have a standard citywide naming donation policy. I was asked to do some research on that, and I did provide you kind of an overview that when I looked at other cities, there's no way to just say, here's your cookie cutter policy that will cover every instance and situation, because every policy I reviewed is still open to discretion by the governing board. Every policy sets some kind of limit at which time it comes to the board. Some set them at $10,000, some set them at $25,000. Some were higher than that. And some of them gave you the opportunity to waive that criteria if you wanted for other events or other certain circumstances. We do currently have a donor guideline policy for Park and Rec that's already been established, but of course that doesn't cover the Corn Palace. But most of the guidelines that I reviewed, even when the city has an umbrella policy, individual departments may also have a departmental policy. So Park and Recs would fall underneath the umbrella policy. You would ask then the Corn Palace Events and Entertainment Board probably to draft a policy specific to the Corn Palace. Did I cover everything? I think that was everything that was at least discussed at that meeting. Just for clarification, whoops, this is the wrong one. I also gave you an outline of some of the things that it seemed to each policy at least gave some criteria under which the naming would be considered, that they talked about how donation and sponsorships would be held, how they would recognize any sponsors. They outlined an application process. Sometimes that was just done in an internal department. Sometimes they had a standing committee comprised of council members and internal department heads and the mayor. And then all of them set limits. They said, okay, if we let you name this facility, that doesn't mean you get to tell us how to use the facility for the life of the facility. It usually had a length of time to which that naming rights expired, which is a lot of what Justin was writing into some of those agreements that we have now for other sponsorship, like the Pepsi, the beverage rights, one that we sold. So that's about as much as I can give you for basic guidelines. I did give you a couple sample policies to look at. If this is something that the council wants to proceed with, you could give some recommendations on what you liked and didn't like. You could have a subcommittee work together with a couple department heads that would regularly use this and kind of picking the pieces that we like to go forward. Or if you don't want to look at it, that's fine too. I just wanted to give you something to start some discussion.
Well, I don't think we should name the floor for him. You know, if we want to have a Hall of Fame and we want to include Gary Munson and we want to include, you know, Mike Miller and we want to include Gordy Fosness and, you know, maybe some other coaches in the future, you know, Jason Christensen's a young guy and had some success, and Wes Morgan's a young guy and had some success. If we want to include people like, you know, Oscar Howe and maybe some of the other designers of the Corn Palace, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily have to be basketball. I guess I would be open to that. We've had baseball people raise a lot of money. We've had hockey people raise a lot of money. We've had tennis people raise a lot of money. And the latest one is the swimming people who are raising, you know, figures with 9 zeros behind them. And none of them are getting anything named after them. I just think, you know, it's different. We talked earlier, the chief talked earlier about the benches. I think it's different when you buy a specific thing. Or if, you know, somehow, you know, the Mel Olson Foundation gave $9 million to build the pool, lock, stock, and barrel. But to just, in this particular case, put a name on the floor, whatever name that is, whether it's Gordy Fosness or somebody else, for nothing, in the iconic Corn Palace, even if there was money attached, people come to play the Corn Palace. They don't come to play the Mel Olson floor or the, you know, Bob Johnson wing or whatever the case may be. So I guess I'm happy if we want to look at a policy, but when it comes to the Corn Palace, I think the Corn Palace belongs to everybody, and it needs to say the Mitchell Corn Palace. Like I say, I'm open to hanging plaques or anything else in a Hall of Fame, but don't name the floor.
We can probably take that concept, you know, even further is, you know, what other facilities we have, other assets we have. And that might be exactly the conclusion, Mel, but before we proceed with this decision, I would really like to have a policy in place because, again, the other thing you just brought up is, should there be some financial attachment to that? And if not, what's the reasonings for that? And I really think that if Stephanie would maybe have a subcommittee or to a certain degree of coming up. I looked at all of these and read through them, and I think there's a little bit in every one of them I kind of like.
Yeah. Years of length, the minimum, maximum, who decides,
Right.
Can it be overridden? Other naming items, in a couple of them, they had streets and areas of town and those types of things, which we really haven't even talked about in the past, other than when developers develop an area, they can name the street as long as it's not conflicting with anything. But that kind of brought me back, and I wanted to ask Nate, because I've seen the Park and Rec policy. It's been in existence for 3 or 4, I think, since the Pepsi complex came out and we kind of said, ooh, we need to know how much some of these things are going to be. Has the Park and Rec Board dealt with new requests since you've been here along that policy?
Only with like the Pepsi agreement that we
With
just did.
the pool and
Yeah,
the
so
slide
any of
thing.
those donations that help guide us on what direction we would go, especially with naming the facility, we didn't want to give away the farm there. So, I mean, it was, it really helped out in that situation. And any other conversations, I can't think of any right now that we've had in the last year.
The only one that Nate and I have talked about quite a bit is reserving that opportunity in the future as we get into the remodeling of the rec center.
Yep, that's correct.
from
The
a
sponsor,
building
yeah,
standpoint? Okay.
because you're looking for a large sponsor that would be more than 50% donation of the remodel.
But the gym there already has FD Randall on it, I believe.
Yep.
A big
We're
plaque.
Yeah, we have a
talking about the
Randall gym.
Facility itself.
Yeah,
The gym facility, right,
the Randall Gym, yeah.
yes.
And I've even had some informal discussion about our plaza out here, and in all reality, couldn't get very far at all because didn't know what financial percentage or
Naming the
amount.
plaza, you mean?
Right, and just some initial conversations, and so, again, there's so many different avenues that we could look at this, and I really feel that if we've got a policy in place, at least it's a start, it's a guideline, it's not gonna cover 100% of the situations that we come across, but at least it's gonna give you a start, and then if it's outside of the guideline, you have to give reasonings to the public as to why. So,
And I did like that most of the policies that I looked at, if you're actually looking at the entire name of the facility, like if you were going to call the rec center the Nathan Powell Rec Center, whatever the naming criteria be for sponsorship, it comes to the council, so the public is aware of that request, and you get the opportunity to get feedback, because that's, when you're naming a facility, that's going to be a 15-year commitment, and make sure the public's aware of what decisions being made. And you're right, Jeff, we've even had other people ask about features within the plaza, and because of the cost of some of those features, you don't want to name the entire plaza when it's not even covering a cost of one of the features. So I think if you're going to look at putting a subcommittee together, it would be good to have maybe 3 city councilors, and obviously Park and Rec represented. We'd want Justin there, and Corn Palace represented, and probably Public Works if you bring in the street naming guidelines kind of thing too.
I know that when we did the Pepsi soccer complex, and we've got $200,000 from the Earl Norby family, we had 2 councilmen, which was Marty and myself, the mayor, a couple people from the park department, and a couple that was the department heads and an assistant, and some of the park members. That's how we came up with that cost.
Yep.
And it took us a good month to come up with a policy. We did it. We went back and we sold the program. So
And also the donor guidelines also help us with the signage. So like when you go to the tennis court, there's a standard signage rather than it looking like NASCAR out there, so.
And Jeff, you're right, though, having a standard policy would really help individual departments make sure that we're operating consistently across departments.
right, I was just gonna mention that when the hockey arena was built, Steve and I were on the fundraising campaign, and we had to sit down, just like Danny did, because we had a certain amount that we had to raise, it was $500,000, how do we get there? And part of the, obviously the advantage is to be able to have some naming rights, and so we didn't know how to all go about it, but we did get the blessing from the Park and Rec, but they didn't have a policy in place at the time either, so it was kind of a disadvantage for everybody. But we got it kind of figured out in the end, and I don't know, Steve, as president, if maybe you and Stephanie kind of spearhead this and get the committee and ask who would like to be part of it, and
I would like,
come back in whatever number of weeks or months you think is
and
appropriate.
we will, and yeah, I think we can do that, and I would like at least 2 council members, somebody from Park and Rec, and then somebody from the Corn Palace Operations Group, which would probably be Scott, and then Stephanie, whoever else you think might be able to do that. And I'd like to say we're going to come back at a particular time. I don't want to leave it open-ended if we can agree to
Just say
that.
by
but
the end of the year?
By the end of the year?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't object to this approach, but I think Mike Miller deserves
Right.
an
Oh,
answer
that's-
before the Mike Miller
Right.
Classic.
Yeah, that's a,
The one other comment, the reason why I had so many samples up there is I didn't want to assume where the council wanted to take it for direction, but I wanted to give you a couple of good examples that I found through our ICMA website that look like some were pretty comprehensive and some were really
yep.
basic. So
And
just
thank
kind
you
of
for
give
that.
you
It-
an idea
it
of what to
opened
think
some
about. Yep.
different ideas about length and areas and not just this is for naming buildings. Yeah, I think we'd like to do that. But Mel's point, so yes, we can say we will make a citywide policy, but we still have the question, the actual agenda question of the Gary Munson Court item, at least for between now and the end of December.
The Classic, how about could they do a trial basis for 2 days and put a sticker down for the Classic and see how it works, or? I've heard that part too.
Ooh, pop my PC. Personally, I don't have an issue with that. That was one of the recommendations of put the stickers down for the games this December, and then
See how that works and go
we'll
from there.
move on. Then they'll come off.
I don't,
But then
That's
we'll
actually
move on
what-
after that. But
And that's actually some of the phone calls I've been getting of late. I mean, I've been getting both in favor, not in favor, do some kind of recognition. You had a heck of a legacy, you deserve some recognition somewhere. I've had some people say that, like, why do you have to name it anything? I mean, don't name it at all. It's always going to be the Mitchell World's, the Corn
Always
Palace.
the Corn Palace.
And you're going to always relate to that when you want to play. We're going to play in the Corn Palace. We're never going to go play in Gary Munson Court. It's always going to be the Corn Palace. But a lot of people have been coming lately. I've been hearing, I don't know if they've been talking amongst this group of people that have been calling me, but they said, put his name on the court, put his maybe years that he was the coach and maybe his number of wins or 22 titles or whatever it is, just have that in an area. And if you want to put Mr. Fawcett over here, put him over here in this area. There's like 4 different locations on that court that you could actually just recognize it. Ain't calling the name of the court or anything, it's just putting their name down there on recognition on a sticker. And that's maybe a possible way too to consider, is just no different than we're going to do it for this little weekend event coming up. Try it there, but I said, just put the sticker on the court. You don't need to name it anything. Put
I
it on
talked
the court.
to Scott
It's like a
Schmidt,
plaque on the wall, but it's on the court.
and he said there's 180 events last year at the Corn Palace, and 60 of them were where you could see the court. So 2/3 of the events at the Corn Palace, you don't even see. It's covered up.
And my thing is that the Corn Palace is not just a basketball court. I mean, it's obviously, if you're talking about all of those events, it's so much more than a basketball court. The floor is so much more than a floor that kids run up and down on. And I'm reticent to name it as if that were the singular purpose of that facility.
Can we do this? Can we table this specific request? Because to me, this request is a permanent naming. And then for the next agenda, pursue Marty's idea for simply the Mike Miller Classic. And put the stickers down.
For the 2 or 4 days, whatever the
Right.
Classic is.
And then when we have a policy, then we can bring this specific thing back and see if we want to make it a permanent thing. But I personally am not in favor of naming it permanently, but I think at some point this gets insulting to Mr. Miller. And so maybe that's the best of both worlds for the Mike Miller Classic to put it down and then to wait for the policy to see what we're going to do permanently, if
I
anything.
think that's a great idea, Mel, because we've always liked to incorporate our committees on any decisions, especially ones that are long-term. And so we've got not only the entertainment committee, but the Corn Palace Operational Committee, and they need to at least voice their opinion if they think it should or should not be anything financial associated with that. So I think that's a great idea, and I don't know, with being on the agenda as it sits here tonight, Stephanie?
I guess the one request I would give you is if you're going to table it, table it indefinitely or kill it so that you're not leaving the public wondering when this is going to come back again. So we're not getting calls every week wondering when it's going to be scheduled, just so they know where you're at with the naming. And then you can state that you can bring back the request for the Mike Miller Classic. But I don't want to leave people hanging where they're calling every week wondering if it's going to be back on the agenda because it's just tabled.
Because it won't be done in 2 to 3 weeks anyway. It ain't gonna happen.
Well, then I will move that we deny the request with the understanding that we'll take up the Mike Miller Classic only sticker at our next meeting. If that's all right. We can,
Deny will kill it, I guess. Tabling, I think, at least brings it back after the policy's in place. But you obviously can do what you want as far as a motion, though.
well, you know, I think, as Stephanie said, if we don't kill it, the questions will still come. If we kill it and we get the policy, then we can bring it back up at that time. But this is a specific request from Mike Miller to name the floor forever. And half a loaf, name the floor for the Mike Miller Classic, and then when we get a policy, maybe the policy says you give us $1 million, we'll name the floor forever. And then we go back to Mike Miller and say, is it worth $1 million to you, or whatever. But maybe the Faustness family gets wind of it and says, we'll raise you $200,000 or whatever, I don't know.
And Jeff, my intention was just to answer the questions from the public that we get calls asking if it's going to be back on the agenda and when.
Yeah.
Yeah, we obviously do too.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Is there anyone in public, in the audience, that would like to comment? We've commented a lot. Is there anybody out there that wants to say anything? Okay.
Right, that's my
Deny
motion.
Gary Munson Court.
Yeah.
Yep.
With the understanding that at the next meeting, we'll have the Mike Miller Classic only thing on the agenda, and then we can go from there.
And also with the intention of, once the policy's in place and it's made public, then if they want to circle back around, and if anybody
For
wants to
naming
take
rights.
an application for any naming rights, then they've got the ability to do that.
You know, I think one of the,
Sorry.
Yep.
I think one of the challenges was that this came to us kind of late in the game, no pun intended, just, it was October when we first got wind of it, or maybe the end of September, and it just really didn't give us quite enough time to get our ducks in a row, to have the policy and to do all the things that we needed to do. So I think that this is probably a good way to do it, so that knowing that we can always revisit it later on.
The question I have is the fact that it's going to be stickers for a weekend, that they're going to honor Mr. Munson at, I believe is the purpose of why they want to put the stickers on for that weekend. Does it have to come back to us? I can't internally, Scott Schmidt, make a decision that I'm going to have stickers put down, knowing that they're going to be removed. It's a weekend event. I'm just really questioning, does it have to come back to council
Can you
for
just give
a
him
weekend event? He's not
authorization to do
changing
it?
anything city-owned. He ain't changing no city policies. He's just going to put it on the court. They're going to have their induction or honor or what they're going to do, and it's going to move on. It's going to come back. I just really question why that part needs to even come back to us. I mean, to my book, now we're really micromanaging something that isn't going to be changed permanently. Let the Court
Yeah.
Palace Committee make their decision.
If you're
Good
still
idea.
wanting to show in the motion that that's what your
Who wants
intention
to?
is, because that's what I'm getting, you want the public to know, you could
Right.
say, with the understanding that the council understands that
The
Scott
Mike
can
Miller
do it for
Classic.
the Mike Miller Classic.
Classic.
If it was right.
If they're making, this tournament is at the end of December, you just don't make a sticker overnight. Okay?
Right.
So they probably need to get them ordered if they haven't already.
And let
So-
Scott approve the stickers. He's the manager.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
That's fine with
People
me.
making the motion?
My only thinking was then, and since you said it publicly, it doesn't factor in anymore, but that Scott then would get some grief over, well, the city council denied it and you put them down and, that kind of thing. So
Well, I think that the council denied the permanent,
Right.
permanent naming, but the fact that at the operations committee, some alternatives were brought out. We're denying the permanent naming, but saying one of the alternatives for this year's Mike Miller Classic is acceptable to put the stickers on. Chuck, yep, yep.
My name is Jim Johnston. I guess the only concern I have about Mr. Olson's proposal is, are you as a council saying tonight that you are denying the request to have the court named the Gary Munson Court, and that's a done deal? I mean, why can't it just be tabled, like you were talking about earlier, rather than denying the actual request? Are you, based upon the motion that Mr. Olson had, does that mean you are denying the request to ever have it named the Gary Munson Court?
No.
Okay.
Not ever have it named, no.
Okay.
Table, and we don't know when it's going to.
Right. But why do you have to have the deny the name of the court? And I could be wrong on one thing, but I thought the Mike Miller Classic was talking about putting stickers on the floor that said Mike Miller Classic. Am I right or wrong on that? I didn't think they wanted to put stickers down that said Gary Munson Court. I don't know, I could be wrong.
My understanding was that they were going to be Gary Munson Court.
That could be, I'm not, but you're not saying tonight that the request is being denied and can't come in front of this council again?
No.
You're not saying that with that request, Mel?
Right.
No,
Okay.
but what we're saying is, the policy may be, and I'll be ridiculous, the policy may be you got to give us $20 or you got to give us 20 million. And at that point, maybe the Munson forces aren't willing to do that, and the Faustness forces are, or the Oscar Howe are. So it may come back for Gary Munson, it may come back for somebody else.
Don't you think that there's a time when somebody has done something in this community for a long time and they deserve some sort of recognition like that? I don't think there should always be a dollar amount put on that. I mean, I think it kind of cheapens the whole name of the court being named after somebody. If you say, you can name it after so-and-so if you give us $20,000, does that mean anybody can come in, if they've ever been to the Corn Palace or not, and say, I want to name the Joe Blow Corn Palace, and I'm going to give you $50,000, and nobody knows who Joe Blow is? I mean, there's a difference between giving money and there's a difference recognizing somebody who has done something for a long time. And I know we talk about the situation at the soccer fields, and that was both a great contribution to Mitchell and a business investment. You know, and I think that's a little different than what naming the court at the Corn Palace is. I don't know if how many of you are aware of this. You might not hang out in the locker rooms, but the referee's dressing room at the Corn Palace is named after my dad, the Harv Johnston referee's dressing room. And that was done at a time when Tony Sealer was on the council a long time ago, you know. And since then, my family has given money to put new carpet in there and to put a TV in that room and stuff like that. But it was an honor for my father. They didn't come and say, you know, if you give us $20,000, we'll name the referee's dressing room after your dad. I think that there's a big difference between a donation and recognizing somebody.
Right, and let me say in response that the answer is yes, I agree that there are times when people should be recognized simply for their contribution. And with this policy, it could be such a thing that, you know, Joe Blow shows up with the money. We don't know what that policy will be. And if this were not a city facility, if this were a high school facility, like that. But it's a city facility, and you know, Gordy Faustness people, Dakota Wesleyan play there. They could make the same argument.
You know, I understand what you're talking about as far as being a city facility and not a school facility, but Mitchell is definitely unique around the state of South Dakota. I don't know of any other high schools that play their high school basketball games on a city facility. Most of them play them at their high school. Now, there might be some that I'm not aware of, but as far as I know, refereeing around the area, I don't know of any. So that's why it's a little more unique about that. You know, the other thing is, you know, we talk about the court. If it's named the Gary Munson Court, it has nothing to do with tourism. I mean, the Corn Palace Court is covered with souvenirs during the summer, so it's got nothing to do with it. It's not going to affect it. Has nothing to do with Corn Palace Week. It's covered with chairs. Has nothing to do with the rodeo. Has nothing to do with the Shrine Circus. Has nothing to do with prom. It only comes into play 3 months a year when that facility is basically a basketball court. And when basketball fans come around the state to the Corn Palace for basketball, they know the name Gary Munson, and they know the tradition of Mitchell High School basketball. And that's why I think it's kind of a special thing. And it's kind of a unique thing. But, I mean, it's not like we're asking to name the Corn Palace the Gary Munson Corn Palace or the such and such business Corn Palace and commercialize it. This is being, I mean, the suggestion is there to recognize an individual for what they did for many years. And I think there's a big difference in that.
And I agree with that. I would simply say that there are many people who don't think it should be named the Gary Munson Court for a variety of reasons.
I understand that.
So
I understand that. I mean, I know there's two sides to everything. I guess my only concern is if you deny it tonight, does that mean that there could be an organized group come in here and there is no organized group right now. I didn't even know anything about this until I saw it in the paper 6 weeks ago, and I didn't come to the meeting because I thought it would be done like that. Then when it was denied, I was kind of surprised. But I don't know why you want to deny it tonight. Can't you just table it and have Stephanie's committee form principles or ways of naming things? I mean, I'll give you another example. I actually started a thing out at Cadwell Park a long time ago. It's called the Honorary Field Fund. And this is after we had built the new fourplex for softball fields, so not the one on the west, but the one on the east. And we needed scoreboards, and the city didn't have the money to do it. So we started up an honorary field fund at Cadwell Park, and for $20,000, you could have the field so named after somebody in your family or whatever. Well, my sisters and I bought a field for $20,000 for my mom and dad, Harvey Nagina Johnston Field. Fuzz Smith, another gentleman in town, bought one for he and his wife. And I was kind of hoping the softball players would kind of take the lead and sell the other 6 fields, but that hasn't happened. But that was set up that way, to have fields named after somebody by giving money. And I just think that that's a different deal than the Corn Palace for a guy who did as much for the community of Mitchell over a long time as Gary Munson did.
I think what you were sort of maybe alluding to, Jeff, is the fact of the denying and tabling sort of serves the same purpose. It's just the fact that what's going to hit maybe the paper and what people understand when they hear the word deny, they believe we just said, boom, it's done and over with. By doing the table indefinitely means that it isn't over yet. We just got some things to work out, and it's public perception is what it's all about, and that's the public perception. The word deny to the word table. It serves the same thing. It just means totally different to somebody else that isn't listening to this meeting right now.
And I don't have any problem tabling it. It just means I'm going to get mail and emails saying don't name it after Gary Munson until we take it up again. That's all.
I'm sorry,
I said I don't have any problem tabling it. It just means I'm going to get mail and emails and people talking to me in line saying don't name it for Gary Munson.
You can handle that though, can't you?
Well, I've been handling it for the last few weeks, yeah. 2 a day.
I understand that. I mean, there's people who feel different ways. I totally understand it. I basically agree with Marty in regards to the word deny. If I read the word deny on the front page of the Daily Republic tomorrow morning, that seems to me as the council has said, no, we're not going to name it the Gary Munson Corn Palace. And I don't think that's exactly the thing you decided tonight.
Well, I don't have any problem withdrawing my motion. And I will.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been withdrawn.
Move to table.
Second.
Definitely.
Until the policy is in
Until the
place and
policy
approved.
is-
Technically, with Robert's rules, if you
Yep.
table it indefinitely, you're killing the motion. So if
Yeah.
you want to pick a date certain, you could pick January 15th.
When?
The second meeting in January would be January 15th.
I don't think we
Is
can
that
be done
enough
by
time?
then with the Christmas holidays.
I don't either, but.
Let's just go with the first Monday in February.
Which would be February 5th.
There you go.
Because otherwise, if you table indefinitely, you're killing the motion.
Yep.
But if you give a deadline, at least then we can tell everybody February 5th.
So thank you for allowing me to say something. Thank you.
Okay.
And we are still allowing
Did you get a
for,
second?
Oh, did we?
Did you second?
We had a motion
Motion,
and a second. Okay.
February 5th.
and we are still allowing them to put a temporary sticker on for the Mike Miller Classic this year.
Leaving,
Approved by Scott.
As approved by Scott. Okay, so we have a motion to table to February 5th, seconded by Kevin, and then have Scott continue to talk with the Mike Miller Foundation for identification of the floor for this year's Mike Miller Classic. We're okay there? Okay.
Good.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. Okay. Next item, authorize the mayor to enter an agreement A 2017-31 for water tower mixing city project 217-36 with KLM Engineering.
Tim McGannon, the staff report in your booklet or online states that the budget for this project was $100,000. I looked again, it's $125,000. We have 6 quotes, 3 for the Gridby system that we're proposing, that our consultant is proposing, and 2 riser tubes and 1 that's called a PAC system. Our consultant believes that the Gridby is not only the least expensive, but the most efficient system we can put in. With the $125,000 budget, so far our consultant AE2S charged us $15,000 to do this study and recommendation. I believe they will be less than $10,000 on the remainder installation. And I think we can also get KLM Engineering down to $25,000, so we're going to be under $50,000 out of the $125,000. So I'm asking that you, I guess, allow the mayor to enter a contract. It's under the bid limit, whether it's 27.9 or 24.9, it's under the bid limit. Authorize the mayor to enter a contract with KLM Engineering to install this system.
So moved.
Okay, motion and second to accept KLM Engineering or have the mayor enter in contract with them. Any discussion? What would be the timing?
I'm not sure yet. I think we would certainly get them on board before the end of the year, whether they can get the equipment.
Is it something they can do in the winter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion?
They do this underwater.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. Next item is second reading and adoption of ordinance 0217-15 recreational burning.
Hi, Paul Morse, Assistant Fire Chief. I believe you all have the ordinance in front of you, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
I don't know if you guys heard any comments either way, but I was just absolutely silent. I don't know, all the comments I got was on the Munson deal, so. But it somewhat tells me that I guess they're just comfortable the way it is, and not saying that this isn't a good ordinance, but we just put ordinances on the books just to, I guess, add to it. But I don't know what you guys think, but I didn't receive any comments either way.
The only clarification was what that I see with this is that this past summer when we had a burn ban, and I can't remember who I called. I don't know if I called Lyndon or who I called, but someone told me that their neighbor was ticketed for having a fire in their burn pit or in their fire pit in their backyard. And I was like, really? I had no idea. The kids were all home and we'd been roasting marshmallows in ours. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I called, and do you remember me? Was it? Yeah. And it hadn't actually happened, and it was hearsay and whatever. The only thing that this does is explains that you can have a backyard fire under these circumstances, even when there's a burn ban in the county, which I think is worth noting for the citizens, because there may be that confusion.
And in the burn ban, and I don't have that language in front of me, but in the burn ban that the county had put out, they had specifically excluded recreational fires.
Yeah, but nevertheless, I think.
So I don't know who got ticketed, but I can.
No one did, actually.
But I'll need to know what day you were burning.
Yeah.
I think it's every day.
We are roasting marshmallows all year long, no. But yeah, so it actually didn't end up even panning out, and I think we went to, I can't remember all the things that happened and transpired, but come to find out it was like she heard and yeah, anyway. But at the end of the day, there was a level of confusion that this does clarify that says, you know, there may be a burn ban, but you can still, in an approved area, have a fire in your backyard. So that may be noteworthy.
I've had one complaint in 12 years on the council, and that was on, I think it was East 4th. That was 7 years ago. I have no problem with what we have in place now.
Paul, do you want to go over kind of the basis of the complaints that you guys receive?
Sure. You know, as I said 2 weeks ago, we get maybe a half a dozen to a dozen complaints a year, and it's primarily going to be smoke is blowing in my window from my neighbor burning next door, or they're out there burning garbage or something other than a pure wood product, you know, maybe something that's got varnish or paint on it that's going to create a lot of dark smoke. By far, the biggest complaint that we get, and we go over and investigate them, is I've got smoke blowing in my window. My wife is asthmatic and we can't stand it. And we get over there and it may or may not be happening. The problem that we run into is we really don't have any foot to stand on to tell that person who's doing the burning that you got to stop. You know, if that fire is close to the structure maybe, close to that occupancy, that, you know, we have a fear that there's going to be a hazard there, it's going to start the building on fire, we certainly have the ability, as outlined in the International Fire Code, that we can go in and do that. We can put that fire out and be fully justified in doing that. Right now, we unless it's something of that nature, we just don't have any footing to stand on, really.
The other advantage that I saw was, and I don't know if you call it a recommendation or a mandate, but the recommendation that a fire pit be 25 feet from your house, which I thought, well, gosh, I wonder if ours is, you know, and not to put a fire pit on a wood deck, for example, or things like that. You know, I think that maybe sometimes people don't think about these things. So I do think that there's something to be said about having this kind of a guideline for people to be aware of.
Yep.
Not that I've had any complaints, I agree with you, but I do see some value when I read through this. I thought, well, you know, that does serve a purpose. So, and if you're getting the complaints, whether we are or not, that to me tells me that maybe there's something that you need this to be in place. So I would be supportive of it.
And typically, any complaints, you know, of that nature typically do come to us before they would come to you. And again, it's not a lot, it's 6 to a dozen a year, but again, we don't have any guidance to go with on how to handle some of these calls, and this just kind of helps us out a little bit more. Now, I'll tell you what happens when we do go over there. People usually do comply with what we say, because we show up in a big red truck and we all have badges on, and they just do what we tell them to do. But I don't want to get to a point where we're being challenged in the future.
My comment, and I made it in some of my questions the last time, is I partially don't really see the need for this. And the section that talks about fire pit located at least 25 feet from buildings or property lines, there are 3 fire pits in our neighborhood, Paul, that are in violation of that. And so if somebody complains, this means that we're going to go make those people change their fire pits?
Well, this is something Justin and I had talked about earlier today about a grandfather clause, and I'll let Justin speak to that.
Yeah, that's just another topic that we tried to come back on. And, well, first let me tell you that the 15-foot and the 25-foot restrictions that are included in there, those come out of the International Fire Code. That's where those numbers came from. So
That's great, but we've allowed people to build them in all sorts of places, and some of them very expensively. And if somebody's going to complain and go do that, then all of a sudden we're going to have the authority to say, you have to move it. And I do not think that is fair.
Well, and I think that's a fair concern, and if that's something that the council wants to address, as Paul suggested, some kind of grandfathering clause would take care of that issue.
I agree. I haven't had a lot of calls. They've been the other couple hot topics on the agenda lately. But for the minimal calls that we get each year, I have a question trying to put some ordinance together that we just don't need to really add to what we have going on right now. It just doesn't seem like we really have much of an issue out there, and I just really question putting more ordinances in place just because we maybe don't want to possibly get into an issue at some point down the line where we really don't have any issues right now. And And we might do the grandfather thing, we'd have to, because I know there's several places all over the neighborhoods that would have to remove their fire pits. So I know we could do the grandfather thing, but I just still question trying to put an ordinance in play that we really don't have many issues to doing. It ain't worth or value under 10 phone calls a year to put an ordinance in play, I guess is where I'm at.
That's one reason that we didn't come back with a suggestion for a grandfathering clause, is because we didn't know how the council would want to proceed on it.
How would you, a grandfathering clause, how would you quantify or how would you verify when a structure was built? I mean, if we're just taking people's words for it, then.
Right. I guess I'm kind of guessing here a little bit, but I think that the fire department has a good idea of some of the more substantial pits out there. They've had some past contacts with certain places. Otherwise, I mean, we could sure try to, have people provide some documentation for when a more robust fire pit was constructed. But if it's just, a pit that you can throw down from Walmart wherever you feel like it, then I don't see that as being a substantial problem for people to have to move an extra 4 or 5 feet.
I think if you have 6 to 10 complaints a year, you don't have a problem. I mean, if you had 60 or 70 of them, then you have a problem, but 6 or 10 complaints, I'd say, keep it the way it is.
And I think we have to assume people don't want to burn their houses down. Right,
Or their trees.
right.
I'll make a motion to deny the ordinance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny the ordinance 2017-15.
Correct.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay.
Thank you.
Second reading is denied. So the next item is a mute point, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. We're done.